Nice to see you, Sergio. Thanks for coming. I'm just going to wait a little bit for everybody to arrive. Sergio, yeah. I seem to see you every time I've been to the language show. You've been here, Sergio. What I'm going to do is just talk for about 5 minutes until everybody's here. So I'll begin by telling you a little bit about who I am, my background. I'm an English language teacher and have been for many decades. I've spent most of my life living in other countries, including Brazil and Turkey and Spain. Spain is the place I lived for the longest period, but currently I live in Chester in the northwest of England. So I've been teaching English as a foreign language, and at a certain point in my career, I started writing materials. This was actually in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. I started working on some materials for teaching pronunciation, and I had some administrative admin hours, and the school, which was the Cultura Inglesa, they said, could you use your admin hours to write some materials for teaching pronunciation? And I had no idea what to do at all. They wanted something that was fun and game-like, and so I had to start from scratch. I really didn't know what to do with that. But I persevered, and eventually I developed a series of games and stuff which would then go out to this chain of schools, and someone said you should try to publish that. So that's what I did for my first book, which was Pronunciation Games with Cambridge University Press. That was published in 1995. It was a time that we didn't have personal computers. I didn't, at least. So it all had to be done longhand and typed up. And all of the diagrams I had to draw with a pencil. So that took quite a long time, as you can imagine. I started it, I suppose, around about 1990 and then published in 1995. It seems to have been very popular. It's still on sale today, and everywhere I go, people go, "Oh, you're the guy who wrote Pronunciation Games." A little bit later, I did the Pronunciation in Use, the first one of those. I guess that came out in the early 2000s. The editor at Cambridge said, I don't know if you know the In Use series, there's a famous one by Raymond Murphy, Grammar in Use, and they said to me, would you try to write an equivalent for pronunciation, which was tricky. It was difficult, but that's what I did, and that's English Pronunciation in Use. And then more recently, I've self-published, in fact, a whole series of pronunciation books under the umbrella title of PronPack. The most recent one was last year, which was this Connected Speech for Listeners, which means that in the last couple of years, I've spent an intense amount of time thinking about the overlap between pronunciation and listening. And that is strange because I think in the world of language teaching, we tend to think pronunciation is something about getting your students to get their mouth around the new language, something productive, a productive skill. But at least as important, possibly more important, is the importance of pronunciation for listening. It's something I hadn't really realized when I started out, with pronunciation games, for example. I hadn't really considered the importance of pronunciation for listening. But this latest book that I just showed you obliged me to really think it through. So in the webinar, which I'm about to present now, it's really an overlap. If you think of one of those Venn diagrams, two overlapping circles, you've got pronunciation and the overlap with listening. And in particular, I want to focus on one specific aspect of pronunciation, which is known to those in the trade as connected speech, which includes things like weak forms, elision, assimilation, the way that words join together in naturally occurring connected speech. I think this is an area which is almost certainly more important for listening than it is for speaking, because to some extent students can get away with not doing much of it in their own speech, but they can't avoid hearing it. So they really need to be aware of it, I think, because it's the kind of thing that makes listening so difficult. It's the kind of thing where learners go, I've been studying English for 5 years and I still can't understand people when I speak to them, or I still can't understand movies in English, etc. And they're wondering why is that? I think it's because they're unaware of the way that language gets mashed together in connected speech. So that's the focus of what I'm going to talk about today. I'd like to start with a little activity that involves you participating, if you don't mind. It's called dictation. You just simply have to write down 5 short sentences, which I'm going to say. Very short, they're like 4 words or so. So it shouldn't be too stressful on the old wrists. You could write them in the chat box. I mean, then at least I know somebody's out there. So 5 short sentences. Here goes. Number 1. Give them a hug. Give them a hug. Okay. Number 2. Done us a favor. Done us a favor. Interesting. Number 3, get her a seat. Get her a seat. Number 4, gave him a name. Gave him a name. And the last one, number 5, send us address. Send us address. Okay, thank you very much for those of you who typed in the chat box. I can see already that we don't have unanimous agreement on some of those. And you might be tempted to think, well, somebody's got to be wrong. But I wonder if that's true. In fact, there may be more than one possibility. It's a trick activity, really. Let me show you some possibilities that I came up with. Just a moment, bear with me. Here we are. Yeah, so you can see that there are at least two possibilities, A and B. A and B, at least in my accent, are identical, potentially identical, when in fast connected speech. Give them a hug. It's impossible to know if it's him or them in the second word, because I'm pronouncing them the same. The H has gone missing from him. The TH has gone missing from them. And the vowel sound in that word is just become a very indistinct, reduced sort of vowel. So there literally is no difference, at least in the way I'm saying them. They are homophones, phrasal homophones. Number two, done us a favor, you can see again the second word. I think some people had one and some people had the other in the chat box. You can see the second word, again, potentially identical, because that vowel sound in as and us is just reduced to a small token reduced vowel. Number three, this one's a little bit more interesting, because here you can see that they're both get a receipt, get a receipt, get a receipt. But you can see that here it's only 3 words and here it's 4 words. The word boundaries are not necessarily obvious to a listener. There's no space between words as in writing. It's a continuous flow of sound. It's the listener that interprets it and imagines the kind of space between the words. But you can imagine wrong, or at least you can imagine differently from what the speaker intended. So it's quite a surprising one, that one. Get a receipt, get a receipt. Here you can see the pronoun her. It loses the H there. Get her. That seems to join together. A receipt. Get a receipt, get a receipt. Yeah. And number 4, gave her my name, gave her my name. That's another one that's quite surprising, because there's quite three different words. Only the first word is the same in A and B, but the whole phrase sounds identical. The pronoun sounds the same. And then there's the kind of link here where you don't know if the M belongs with the previous word, as in this case, or the following word, as in this case. So they're linked together. Sender's address. Sender's address. John T had that one, sender's address. Michaela had a sender's address with the possessive, which is also correct. Another possibility. Oh no, that's here. Oh no, Michaela had A and John T had B. Yeah, there you can see. So those two sound identical. So what I was trying to do with that little activity was just to demonstrate some of the ambiguity which arises in connected speech. And it's not the listener's fault if both of these are possible. It's nobody's fault. What happens with learners of English, they tend to think that when they get a different answer from the one that's intended, it's their own fault. They have a strong tendency to blame their own ears, but perhaps it wasn't their fault at all. It's part of the nature of connected speech, these kinds of ambiguity. Let me just take you through a transition from written to spoken. Okay, starting with the written form in number 1 there. Give them a hug. You can see there, grammatically speaking, it's a ditransitive structure. Give, the verb, and then 2 objects, them and a hug. And that grammar is reflected in number 2, where those blobs represent the rhythm, the stress pattern. Give them a hug. Da 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 da. That's a kind of audible grammar. So the ditransitive structure is reflected in the rhythm of the sentence there. In number 3, you can see how the vowel is reduced to this vowel here, represented by a phonemic symbol, which is called schwa. This is a kind of a very indistinct reduced vowel. So the difference between those 2 vowels is gone. They sound like the same vowel because of vowel reduction. In number 4, you can see elision taking place as well. The TH of them has been cut. And this is actually typical. It's not lazy speech. It's not slang. It's common. So you've got give them a hug. Sometimes it's reflected in popular spellings like apostrophe EM. You might see that sometimes, like in pop lyrics, for example. Give them a hug. In number 5, you can see linking happening, where the consonant at the end of one word seems to join up with the vowel at the beginning of the next. Give them. That's called linking. So it sounds a bit like this. Give them a hug. That's typical. In number 6, I wanted to illustrate that I changed the pronoun here, give me a hug. And that's also a common popular spelling. Here you can see that even the main verb, give, even the main verb is not immune to the processes of connected speech. You can see that the V of give has disappeared or amalgamated with the M there. Give me a hug. So that's a kind of illustration of the kind of differences that you get between the written form and the spoken form. To begin with, I'd just like to illustrate a couple of listening exercises that you can do with your students, with your class, if you're teaching English, to help raise their awareness of the kind of features that I've been pointing out here. And for this purpose, there's a very useful site here, Youglish. I'll just pop in the chat box again all of the links I put at the beginning. Well, since I'm talking about the links in the chat box, the first number 1 link is a recorded version of this webinar, although you will have a recorded version as well here in the language show. But the second one, number 2, is a link to this Youglish tool, which I'm going to talk about now. So what you can do with Youglish, which is really useful in my opinion, is that you can ask it to search for small phrases, such as give them a, since we're on the topic of that give and the ditransitive there, give them a. I put give them a into the search. There you can see the search at the top, give them a. And what came up were 13,000 hits. That's 13,000 bits of YouTube video that include that phrase. And what happens is that you press go, and then you hear the first bit. And when you've heard enough, you press fast forward, and you hear another speaker in another context, also using the same phrase. And you can see the phrase down at the bottom with the words that you searched highlighted there. So you get a bit of context before your phrase and after. What happens is that the student, the learner, or yourself, if you're the learner, you get to hear the same chunk in many different voices, accents, contexts, and you get a sense of the variety of possibilities of how that might come out, how it might sound, which is exactly what you need to improve your listening. Because to follow John Field, who is a well-known author on the subject of listening skills, he says that rather than imagining that the learner, has all of the perfect forms of the words located and they match them up to the sounds that they hear listening, actually the learner listener has all of the different forms that they've heard in the past there recorded in the brain, and they match up what they're hearing to that. So what we can do is amplify the learner's repertoire of previous hearings by putting a load of them together this way. Up here, I've put them as it appears in the Cambridge Pronouncing Dictionary. Okay, you can see it's got a strong form, them. It also has weak forms, them or them, and an occasional weak form, or . So that simple pronoun has a range of different forms. And what I want to do next, I'm going to play you a little bit of audio from Youglish, just 20 very short snippets, including give them a. And your task is to listen to them and decide impressionistically, didn't have to be accurate, out of the 20, how many, what percentage use the occasional weak form. In other words, how many of them cut off the th in them? That's your task. How many cut off the th and how many keep it? Okay, so you could put in the chat box a kind of impression. Is it 50%, 25%, 75%, something like that? So I've just got to share my audio, if you'll bear with me. And I'll play the audio coming up in a moment.
If we give them a
And so we give them a chance.
if we give them a chance.
Give them a place.
So if you'd like to give them a try,
we try to give them a band.
To give them a go.
And they didn't give him a lot of attention.
And he'll just give them a hug.
Give them a tiny bit of pain.
Give them a tool to do something.
And give them a click.
Give them a fair and equal opportunity.
Give them a copy of my book.
That we just give them a pass.
I give them a bit of a thought experiment.
But if you give them a basic idea,
They give them a lot to do.
Give them a hug.
Let's give them a certification.
And we want to give them a big, big, beautiful round of applause.
Right, so there you go. How many of them dropped the TH from them? Okay, DY is saying 50%. People are saying around about 50%. Some people saying 60. That's pretty much my impression as well. In fact, I've listened to this quite a few times before, so I would say it was spot on, 55% or something like that. You'll notice that Donald Trump at the end, he didn't do that. He give them because he was specifically being emphatic, and people do that. If they want to be emphatic, they pronounce each word. Hyperarticulation, it's called. But that's not really what people normally do with pronouns like this. Pascal thinks it was less than that. Okay. But it was certainly, my impression was that it was more than just the occasional. It was actually quite a high percentage. Just to give you a visual impression of what we've just listened to, I quite like to present it as an audio concordance where you can see the target phrase down the middle and a little bit of context either side. These are the first 10 of what we just listened to. So sometimes I give learners the written form as well, so that they can consider whether the TH has been pronounced or not, seeing it in front of them, and then underline the ones where, or cross out the ones where it's cut. Variation is the rule, I've said here, Luke. I think a lot of learners have the impression that there is just one form and that's it. Actually, variation is the norm. So in terms of listening, the listener has to be able to cope with variation. It's not just something that's going to happen in maybe a slang street environment. No, it's the norm. So yes, that was a recording which I made from the snippets of one particular search on Youglish. Another thing you can do with snippets like that is something I call micro loops. I'll just let you hear 3 little examples. It just repeats. That's why I've faded it out. It repeats and repeats. I'll play that so you can hear what I'm talking about. Bear with me. Okay.
And so we give them a chance.
If we give them a chance.
Give them a place.
So if you'd like to give them a try,
We try to give them a band.
To give them a go.
And they didn't give him a lot of attention.
And he'll just give them a hug.
Oops, I've got the wrong one, haven't I? Sorry about that, folks. I zoned out.
Give them a click. 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 Give him a click.
Give him a hug. 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 Give him a hug.
Give him a chance. 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 Give him a chance.
I'm calling this drills to the ears. This word drills, normally we think of it as something that the students repeat. The teacher says something and the students have to repeat it. In other words, we think of drills as a productive exercise. But I think you can actually make drills for listening, like what you've just heard there, very short phrases. You hear, I've played them 5 times each one. I also altered the speed, making them slower and faster, just to give the students an opportunity to hear it more clearly. So that kind of micro loop, you can either edit that yourself using some editing software such as Audacity, or you can just slide it back on the audio bar that you see at the bottom of the audio player. You can just give them a clip, give them a clip, give them a clip, play the small chunk over and over again. The effect of hearing it multiple times is actually more than the sum of its parts, by which I mean you don't really, the students notice it more in that repeated form. When they hear it just the once, their mind tends to compensate for the unclearness and they hear what they expect to hear. But when they hear it multiple times, it starts to make you listen more objectively. You hear what's actually there rather than what you think is going to be there. So I think it's micro loops like this are really useful for helping to focus learner attention on bits of connected speech. So those were some activities for actually using audio material. But now I'd like to just run through some of the most important features of connected speech with you as a kind of reminder, if you don't, or if you don't know, telling you. So 6 features of connected speech I'd like to focus on. There you can see them linking with our assimilation, fusion, elision, and weak forms. So linking then, here are some pictures where the caption doesn't seem to match with the image. Well, it's because it's been badly transcribed, but the correct caption sounds identical. And the correct caption for this, anybody got an idea? Find answers. You can type it in the chat box if you like. Find answers? Yes, Charlotte, find answers. Find answers and find answers sound exactly the same. Find answers or find answers. The second one, yes, Luke, that is call Dan. Call Dan, call Dan. They sound exactly the same because you can't tell whether this consonant belongs to the word before or after. You can't tell if the consonant is for this word or this word. The next one, Luca has great eyes for this one. Great eyes, grey ties, or great eyes, great eyes. And the last one, one sweater. Thank you, Luke. One sweater. One sweater, one sweater. So those little examples show linking. Also, look, you can think of this, the social media channel LinkedIn. That's what it sounds like with the linking, linked in. So that's linking. Then there's linking with are. This is actually a game. Don't know, we won't have time to do it, but you have to go from here to here. If there is a secret are in the phrase, for example, in this phrase, idea about, idea about, idea idea about, there seems to be an R appearing between idea and about. It serves to separate those two vowels, idea about. You don't have to do that as a speaker, but as a listener, you might be obliged to deal with it as a listener. You could just go idea about and make a conscious effort to put a gap there, for example. But that doesn't always happen. Here, for example, new age, there isn't one. So we go this way, idea about. It does happen in North American English as well, Pascal, and it actually has been proven to create misunderstandings. One which I remember reading about was the phrase Canada Raid, where it was aid from Canada, but somebody thought it was a raid done by Canadians, Canada Raid. It does happen in North American English. Okay, so idea about, and then we had cinema audience, tuna omelette, and so on. That's how the game works, and then you have to get all the way down to the end. You see how the game works. I'll leave it to you to do that on the recording if you wish. Be warned that there is a dead end here. Saw a film has it, but then you can't continue after that. So you have to go back and continue this way. The next one is assimilation. I want to talk about the way that consonants can change when they meet other consonants. And here's a little rhyme. White cat, black cat, what a very fat cat, good pet, bad pet, got a very mad pet. White cat, black cat, what a very fat cat, good pet, bad pet, got a very mad pet. Here you can see blue copies red. In other words, this consonant here, k. This is actually the word white, but the T has changed in sound. It sounds like k, white cap. Under the influence of the following consonant, this change, apparent change, is typical especially for D, D and T at the end of a word. D and T often change at the end of a word according to the consonant which follows. So you can use something like this to raise your learner's awareness to that. And you can find examples, of course, on Youglish if you want to hear authentic examples. So I'm calling that copycat consonants. The next feature, what I wanted to focus on is fusion. Fusion is when two sounds merge together to make a different one. Here you've got d, y, did, you, and they seem to blend together to make a j, did you, did you. Here you've got don't you, and they seem to blend together to make ch, don't you. So j and ch are the results of fusion here. Sometimes you hear it, you see it in popular spellings like what do you say. So these sentences here have been mistranscribed under the influence of fusion. Have you made your sandwiches yet? This part here is wrongly transcribed. What should it be? Have you made your sandwiches yet? Thank you, Charlotte. Made your. It sounds exactly the same as major. Have you made your sandwiches yet? Okay, number 2. I passed you on the street today. Passed you. Thank you, Jeanette. Passed you. Number 3. What made you lie to the police? Made you. Thank you, Charlotte. Made you. What made you lie to the police? Picked your kids up from school yet? Picked your kids up from school yet? Thank you, Jeanette. Picked your, and Luke, picked your kids. And the last one, I didn't know you sold your flat. Sold your, thank you, John. Yes, sold your. I didn't know you'd sold your flat. Sold your flat. So these are examples of fusion. And then elision. I'm calling this fast forward because what happens is it seems that the speaker fast forwards over certain letters or sounds as they're speaking, as in fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. It's as if they're fast forwarding over that T, fast forward. Here's a little rhyme containing plenty of it. Slept well last night, woke up first light, cold wind, sky bright, best time just right. Slept well last night, woke up first light, cold wind, sky bright, best time just right. In each case, the missing consonant is either t or d. Here it would be a t, t, t. Here a d, d, t, and t. It's the D and the T which are most vulnerable to this kind of elision. And the worst place for a D and a T to find itself is between 2 other consonants, like in these examples. When a D or a T is sandwiched between 2 other consonant sounds, it's very vulnerable. So good to raise awareness of that. The final feature I wanted to mention is simply that there are certain words in English which tend to be pronounced in a very weak way. So let's say that the language has 2 kinds of words: content words like nouns, main verbs, adjectives, and function words like prepositions, articles, conjunctions, pronouns, okay? And if you think of the metaphor of bricks and mortar, the content words are solid and hard, relatively hard. They don't get too much mangled, but the cement or mortar between the bricks gets crushed into a small space and is malleable. It can be, it can change its form. So function words are something like the cement in the spoken language in between the content words. And that brings us back to the dictation I did at the beginning, like give them a hug, where you don't know if it's him or them. You can hear the 2 function words, them, are indistinct. They're weak forms. They're known as weak forms. Give them a hug. Give and hug, they're both content words, so you can hear them relatively clearly. The function words in between tend to get reduced. To finish off, I'd like to suggest that although even when your purpose might be to work on the receptive skill, sometimes it's a good thing to get your students to try and say it, because sometimes saying it helps you to hear it. Hence this slogan, say it to hear it. Let me explain. there's a feedback loop from the student's mouth to their own ear, and that reinforces their perception. So what I'm saying is, although it might sound a little bit anti-intuitive, sometimes it's useful to get your students to try to produce something in order for them to hear it better. So here's an activity which I call a counting chant, where you're simply replacing parts of the sentence with numbers so that your students don't have to pay attention to it. They can pay attention to the part you want to focus on, which is the function words, the cement, the mortar. So here, for example, give them a 1, give them a 2, give them a 3, give them a 4. You say that, and your students repeat. And you can see if they have any difficulty with that. Point out the way that things are reduced. Hearing it multiple times in their own mouth reinforces their acoustic memory of it. So senders is 1, senders is 2, senders is 3, senders is 4, ask her a 1, ask her a 2, ask her a 3, ask her a 4, etc. So this kind of chant is very easy to invent, improvise as you're going along through a lesson. You can, if your students are having difficulty with some of this kind of language here, you can make a counting chant like that. Finally, I would mention something I call an earworm. An earworm is a very short text with lots of examples of the target feature. In this case, the target feature is the ditransitive structure we saw at the beginning. Give them a hug. Give them a hug. Give them your love. Send her a gift. You've got the elision of them to and you've got the linking, give them a hug. These kinds of features are exemplified here. And I've put them into a little rhyme so that students can hear it and join in, which gives them vocal practice at something that they'll then be able to hear better afterwards. Actually, I've made this one into a recording, so I'll just play that for you. If you'll bear with me. Coming up. Give them a hug, give them your love. Give them a hug, give them your love. Send her a gift, give him a lift. Send her a gift, give him a lift. Make her a cake, give him a break. Make her a cake, give him a break. Send us a link, buy us a drink. Send us a link, buy us a drink. Send him a text, give him my best. Send him a text, give him my best. Give me a call, and love to you all. Give me a call, and love to you all. Obviously, in that version, in the recording I made, the chorus repeats after the main singer, and that's what your students can be doing. You can do this with music or without it. I've put a load of these recordings for different earworms onto the website Pronpack. I'll put it up again just so you can see it. I put it on the my YouTube channel. Which I'm sorry, I can't see it there. Oh yes, it's in the first. If you look at number 1, where you can find a video version of this webinar, that same YouTube channel has a load of these earworms if you wanted to use them. But equally, just do it yourself a cappella. It's not difficult. I've made them so they're not difficult to sing. They're just in an ordinary speaking voice rather than a singing voice. Okay, so that was the end of it, really. So I did have a few references for anybody who's interested, which you can see there. And if you're watching this on the video later on, you'll be able to pause the video if you want to look more carefully at that list. So thank you very much for coming along today. And I'll look in the Q&A if anybody's put any questions in. No one's asked any questions. Thank you. Okay. Anybody want to ask any questions? I guess you could put them in the chat box. Thank you, Pascal. Any questions? Now's your chance. Thank you, Michaela. Thanks, Charlotte. Look, thank you very much for coming today. And for those of you who are watching it in the future, thank you very much for watching right to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye, Sergio. I'll stop it now. Goodbye, everybody.